Lewin, I'm so excited that you're here. Andrew and I met not that long ago on LinkedIn, which is my source of a lot of amazing people that I've gotten to just these magnificent conversations with. And we've tried to record a couple times and are finally maybe going to actually record an episode as opposed to get into some just great conversation that is more interesting to us than makes sense for launching as a podcast. So thank you for joining me. And we are going to hear Andrew's story, which launched him into this incredible career and purpose that he has. And he's surprising me, so I don't know what it is yet. But Andrew is a podcaster extraordinaire of a Protect the Ocean world that we need to really focus on. So I'm going to let Andrew tell us about a little bit about himself and this amazing story and what we can learn from you. So thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. It's so happy to be here, and I'm very excited to be able to finally do this. We did have a conversation last time. I think I made it to one of your podcasts, like just a bit of an introduction, and then we had a great conversation, probably about an hour before that, which was phenomenal. So I'm really happy to be on the podcast today. I'm Andrew Lewin. I'm a podcaster, but I'm a science communicator, really, that uses podcasting and video podcasting as a method to reach to the people to say, hey, you know what? There's some stuff going on in the ocean that you may or may not know about, but I think is really cool. And there's some great people that are in there. And I want you to get to know them just like I got to know them. And I think it'll provide them with a lot more hope, the audience that is, when you hear some of these stories and some of these projects that are going on. And of course, the people that are doing that. Not everybody is a Jacques Cousteau. Not everybody is a Sylvia Earle that get to be on camera, want to be on camera, but they want to talk about their projects. And that's what I truly love about this. And, the story that I came here to tell was really, it's got me to really want to talk about science, because I want to just preface the story before is like when I first started in science, like my science career after I graduated in 2001, people didn't really talk. Scientists didn't talk about science. They didn't really talk. They didn't trust journalists. It was really in the climate denial phase of climate change. And so many of the scientists were going and talking to reporters.
So that was the climate denial phase 20 years ago. Are we in a different place? Please build that into this story, okay? Because you're such the expert on hearing the voices out there.
Well, I feel like the climate denial was coming more from, at that time, was coming more from like the oil and gas industry, and they were using those messages in their PR firms. I feel like now it's like, climate change is here, but there's nothing we can do about it. I feel like that's where that's the message that seems to be coming out at this point in time, which is false. Of course, both of those are false. So, but sorry to get back to it. So we were in that situation, and a lot of the scientists I knew had gone on to speak to reporters and journalists, and some of them, not all, but some of them had their words mixed up and by the journalists, and it just manipulated the conversation to do something that they didn't want to say. And in science, like you're very abrupt, and like science is science. You do a study, you may think that you're going to get one outcome and you get a different outcome, and that may not be the outcome that you wanted, but it's the one that you had, and that's just the way it goes. And you have to interpret the science based off of that and be like, yeah, I was wrong, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being wrong in science. That's the reason why we do science. And so there were a lot of people who were very skeptical about talking to journalists. So we didn't really talk about it. And we weren't, as scientists growing up, like becoming a scientist as a student, you weren't really told, hey, you know what? You should talk to the media all the time. You should discuss your science. And of course, this was before Facebook. This was before, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever we have, YouTube even. And so it just didn't happen all the time. Then we started to, get into 2006 and 2010s and so forth. And then I started to really using Facebook for just little things, social media for little things, connecting with your family and looking at friends that you haven't seen and finding friends you haven't seen since grade school and stuff. And it was fun. It was a good time to do that. Never had I thought that, this is a way to get things out here. Like this is a way to start discussing and
I had no idea what social media was going to offer us.
No clue.
Access to communication, right? Like,
exactly.
And that's so interesting. Like it did not occur. That is such a recent story that you're talking about. I mean, it's like less than 20 years, 15 years ago. Yeah. It was still a time when science wasn't getting out by the scientists.
Right.
And it wasn't common conversation. And that's like just for a moment to stop and think about how recent that is, that we've taken this on and so much has changed, and that it has impacted and reversed climate to a certain extent, climate denial. And now it's just led to climate anxiety, which I'll ask you to talk about as well, right? Like,
For
so much
sure.
information.
So much information. Yeah. And of course, at that time, it still hadn't clicked. I was still trying to, launch my career as a marine biologist living in Ontario. So I was trying to find ways to work and find my path, sort of. I worked in private consulting. I worked in nonprofit organizations, and I just couldn't find my way through. And then the BP oil spill happened, in the Gulf of Mexico, and in my world, it basically stopped, being like, oh my gosh. Now I'd worked in Louisiana, my first job coming out for the state institution called LUMCON, Louisiana University's Marine Consortium. I was in the Gulf of Mexico a lot. I met a lot of people in Louisiana who lived off of fisheries, different types of fisheries and hunting and so forth in the Gulf of Mexico. That was all gone. It was devastating to a lot of people. So I felt like I had a little bit of my heartstrings tugged on that one, because I knew people who were affected, and I lived there, even though it was only for like 8 months. I still kept in contact with people, and it was tough for me to grasp of like what was going to happen. And I couldn't even just imagine what the people there felt like. And nobody really could either at the time. You hear of another oil spill, you're like, oh, this is awful. The animals are awful. I mean, there were on like crazy imagery coming out, and this is what really kicked it off. It was not only just the imagery, it was scientists that were going down to the Gulf of Mexico, and they were working in partnership with CNN. And they were going on, because at first it started off, they were going on Twitter. Now Twitter was exploding at this point, and what people were doing, the scientists were going down to the Gulf of Mexico. They either lived in California, New York. Carl Safina went down. Wallace J. Nichols, may he rest in peace, he went down. They went down and they filmed what they were seeing. You could see the tar balls coming onto the beach, where you really got to see what it was like. Then CNN was like, hey, do you want to be like a in the field reporter for us, because you're an expert and you can just kind of go on? And they had these profiles of people, and I was like, oh, that is really cool. Like, I am seeing this. I trust this person. I know this person, and I trust this person. And Carl Safina was like iconic, and he still is, but like he was an icon back then. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. I get to see what's really happening down there, and they're on the ground. Carl Safina rented a plane.
Andrew, you make like a really important point, like that we hopefully can get to at some point, specifically like to that if you aren't able to be in person, like physically, emotionally in the story, in nature, in the seeing the challenges of nature as well as the beauty of nature. Like if you're not in it, how do you get a feeling that it's important and that it matters and that you need to not just sort of move by as a fictional novel and pretend it doesn't matter. So,
100%. I completely agree. And I think even before that, before like Facebook and Twitter started to explode, we had blogs, right? The Deep Sea News Science, Southern Fried Science, a lot of other marine focused science and wildlife focused science was there, but you were reading it. You didn't necessarily always see the picture. You didn't actually see any video, because video sharing wasn't very popular back then. This was really the first time people got to see an oil spill in person that wasn't broadcasted on a major network channel. And it was just online, and we got to see it, and it was raw. It wasn't like very well produced. It was raw, and it was just that. And it was phenomenal. People were just like, oh my gosh. And everybody said, this sucks. Like, this is bad. BP oil has to pay for this. And they did, $4.5 billion. We can argue the semantics of whether it was enough or what have you. And to be honest, even to this day, this was what, 2010, 2011, even to this day, we're still seeing the effects in the Gulf of Mexico from that oil spill. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, because there was a lot of detail to go into in terms of the dispersants and all the chemicals that were put in. The dispersants are just to hide the oil from the surface so we don't see it. It's just, it was awful. Also, we should mention 11 people died in that oil spill. So that tragedy among tragedies within that. So but that's what really, I started to get that feeling. And I went to Oceans Week in Washington, D.C. at that point. I wasn't working. I didn't have a job. And I wanted to do something. I talked to the people from like Craig McLean from Deep Sea News and Andrew Thaler from Southern Fried Science. They had blogs. I'm like, oh, maybe I should start a blog. Maybe I should do something about this. Still hadn't really launched anything yet. And I went to Oceans Week, Chow. It's basically on Parliament, I shouldn't say Parliament, at the Congress, and that is like a government thing. And you go and there's all these side events and stuff. I got to National Geographic, and I got to meet Sylvia Earle. But before I met Sylvia Earle, I got to meet Charlotte Vick. And Charlotte has I still credit to this day, was a mentor of mine, still is, and she's retired from the area because she's done so much work in this. She's the one who really inspired me to go and do this type of work, because she's like, this is what's needed. And I was very passionate about it. I was young at that time, so I was very passionate. She's like, yes, I love what you're doing. You're a science journalist. This is what we're introduce you to Sylvia. We're going to introduce a bunch of it. Charlotte was one of the people who knew everybody, and she would introduce you to everybody. If you needed a contact, she would give you a contact. Then I was like, okay, a couple of years later, I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast. Like I started video, and that didn't really work out very well at the time. It was a lot of work. And then I'm like, well, I can do a podcast. And that's kind of how it worked. I got through Charlotte, through a lot of the other contacts, I got to speak to, and my own, I got to speak to a lot of the friends and people that I met at conferences, and got to hear their stories of me asking questions. And I was like, people need to know about this. Because when I would speak to other people, when I come home from the conference, I'd speak to my wife, I'd speak to friends and family. I was like, this is really cool. Like, this is really exciting. And people would agree. And like, why don't we hear about this stuff? Because it's not the sexy stuff you want. It's not the shark, quote unquote, attack. It's not an oil spill. It's not a disaster that people feed and they'll come to your TV screens, or now, your internet screens, your computer screens to click on, or even your phone to tap on it. This was the stuff that everybody needs to know to give them hope and to have like some ocean optimism when it comes to protecting the ocean.
Well, it was partly to protect the ocean, and that is. Have you always called it that? Is that always?
It started off as Speak Up for Blue, because I was the mouthpiece because of where I was in Ontario.
Yeah,
I couldn't really go out, and I didn't have the ability to go out to a coastline and do a video right by the ocean, in a tropical setting where we'll get a lot of views, or go to Hawaii and go do a dive and do a voiceover over that. I would love to do that. It's really hard to go diving in Ontario in the winter. It's been done, but it's really difficult. People go do some polar dips all the time, but I just can't do that. Even though I live along the Great Lakes, it is, it's just not the same. And so I decided, you know what? I have this power of the gab. I like to talk. And so I'm like, let's just go ahead. And somebody introduced me to podcasting, and I just, as soon as I got interested, I'm like, I wonder if anybody else is talking about oceans. And I started to look at it. And not many people were. And some of the shows that had been defunctified for a while. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to start this. If nobody's talking about it, I'm that person. It's my entrepreneurial spirit. It's like, if nobody's doing it, I'm going to start doing it. And then that's where I am now. So it started off as Speak Up for Blue. Then I moved it to Speak Up for Ocean Blue, because the on iTunes, when iTunes was still around, and you want to look up a podcast, the search was very literal. It had to be in the title. So if I wanted to rank well for ocean, had to be in the title. Yeah. Just people didn't know what Speak Up for Blue meant. So I'm like, oh, Speak Up for the Ocean Blue. And then I really got into, somebody talked to me. It's like, why don't you just be very literal? Like, what's your podcast about? Well, it's about how to protect the ocean. I'm like, how to protect the ocean. Yes, that's what it was. So it's been like that for about 5 or 6 years now. Okay.
So just like sort of to get the story. So, and to connect it to getting action to happen from those of us who might live in landlocked areas, even if you're in a Great Lakes, with one of the greatest, bodies of water in the world,
Sweetwater Ocean. Yeah.
Right. But the grittiness, like the raw, and you use some of that language, right? The deep connection that you made with what was really happening, and that you shared with what was really happening, like bringing the reality of on the ground, in the water, on the shore, voice for the ocean and the people who were suffering and the nature that was suffering, and giving the feeling in your voice, which has so much, energy and
thanks.
I can't even think of what the word, like so much to it that really carries the message to like make people feel like they're really there without having to be there, which you don't get from the written word the same way, right? You have to have a lot of patience to be able to bring that poetry to life. Like you brought it to life in this really, really intimate way with this beautiful energy. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay. So this was the beginning of like this pathway to changing the world and giving us hope. Okay. So what's the lesson?
Well, the lesson here is like, if you really want to do something, just start it. You know, it was never perfect and it's still not perfect. But I really embrace
there is no perfect.
There is no perfect. Mm-hmm. And I'm a guy who likes to throw stuff up against the wall, see what sticks. That's really what it comes down to. And that's what I've done. I've kind of fumbled through things. There have been episodes that I've put up where I'm like, that's not my best episode, but I'm going to put it up because I think the information is good. And I've done it for, I think today was my 1717 episode.
Okay,
so 1717.
Repeat that, right? Like, because it's mind-blowing. Yeah. I've been trying to, I can't catch up. Like I've been trying to like just sort of, and every episode has its own magic. And just like I hear with my 20 episodes, you know, people say, you know, that was my favorite, even though I was like, that was my least favorite. They're like, oh, like that was my favorite. So you never know what's going to hit.
You never know. You never know it.
Really connect with people. So 1,707 podcast episodes from the beginning of podcasting, from the beginning of all this technology. It's just heartwarming to hear that there's been this passion to bring something so important forward and to talk to 1,700 people, right? And by the way, we were just talking about the fact that we both interviewed Andy DeHart, who's the head of the CEO of Loggerhead. And the crossover in any world is amazing. So like listen to an episode and there'll be listen to a few and you'll find something that you did or you knew or whatever.
Oh yeah. The connections, like I said before, it's the space of marine biology and marine conservation is very small when you get into it, and you start. And what's really nice is many of the people are super collaborative, super friendly. I think that's really what has come down to these days. It never used to be that way, but that's changed over the last 20 years, where people are just trying to support each other. And that's my message. My message is to serve not only like my audience, but to serve the community. Like I want to show your work. I want to talk about your work because I think it's interesting. And that's what I want other people to feel like. And it was really interesting. One of the people that I've interviewed, a good friend of mine, David Schiffman, he's like, Andrew, I love the way you interview. You're so passionate. You really look like you're enjoying it. And it's because I do. It might be a little bit a part of like, there's a little bit of envy that other people get to do this cool stuff. But my thing, and I used to be a little bit like, after an episode, like, I don't know if you feel this way after you do an interview, but I get really jacked up. I'm like, I'm hyped up. I'm like, this is so cool. I'll go and I'll talk to people about it. And my wife's like, okay, settle down a little bit. But I get really hyped up for it. And because I get excited that this work is going on. And it used to be, I'm like, I want to do the same thing. Now it's like, no, I've just done a service where I've taken that message and I've taken whatever that person's learned and whatever the struggles and the successes that person went through, and I've put it on the air. I've put it on a platform that people can access for free. Right. And that's really what it is. That's what I love about podcasting. It's not a radio show where it's nice and polished. It's not NPR, which they do phenomenal shows, right? CBC radio does it up here, but some phenomenal shows, but they put hundreds of thousands of dollars worth into it.
Crazy. It's
nuts. And they're beautiful episodes. Like they're really well done. The people who are doing that are experts and they know what they're doing in their field. They know how to tell stories. They know how to do all that stuff. But for me, it's like, I just want to talk about it. And everybody's like, why don't you niche down to like a specific ocean issue? I'm like, if I do that, then I can't talk about the rest. And I just can't do that. And the reason I'm starting this is to talk about every ocean issue because they're all impacting each other and it's all cumulative and we need to do something about it. And I want to talk about not only just that, I want to talk about everything. And that's what I've been able to do. And that's what I love about like this being independent. It's just mine. I'm not part of an organization. This is just me. It's a way for me to keep doing what I love to do without getting paid for it. Like it's not my full-time job. I do this as an extra. And when I go to work, I have a job that's like in software development, and like I work for a software development company, and it's not anything I do here. So I come home. This is my way to keep connected as a marine biologist, as a scientist.
Sense of purpose. So you said so many things that I found really interesting. I'm sure other people do too. One of them was that the environment changed from people who weren't quite into collegiality and working together and being kind or whatever. Like, that's amazing to me, because I thought our culture was kind of going, our society was kind of going the other way. It's a very weird time of divisiveness and all that. And you're like, no, we've actually gotten to a place where we're supportive. And can you talk a little bit more about, like, because we need that, right? Like, the only way we're going to get in this forward motion path to make change happen and not just keep talking about it is to bring change, the opportunity to change, and to just take the next step to react, to people, so they feel like they can do it. So what do you got on this?
Well, I think things have changed with technology and the new generations that are coming into the world as scientists and as science communicators. Science communication has become a huge part of conservation, and every organization is really focusing in on that type of work. You're seeing a lot more jobs for science communicators, science communication management, head of communications, things like that. And a lot of scientists are getting into that kind of stuff. So I think the technology of social media has really helped scientists be like, I want to share what I do because it's cool. And so they'll be in the lab, or they'll be a student, or they'll be a graduate student or undergraduate student, or they'll just be starting to work. And you get to see people do really cool stuff, and it's fun, and it's really, and people still want to learn. And so I think that has taken down the silos of the past. And what I mean by silos is that you see it in government all the time. When I worked in government for the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans, you saw it, like, people in the same building didn't know the work that other people were doing, or even within the same department didn't know what other sections were doing, because it's such a big thing and they're not interacting all the time. It's not necessarily their fault, but that wasn't really encouraged to cross promote. There weren't meetings going on like, what are you working on? What are you working on? What are you working on? And even in academia, it's a competitive process. You're competing for a lot of the same funding. Same with nonprofit organizations. You're competing for a lot of the same funding. So you want that funding for your institution or for your organization. So you're trying to keep things, like, you don't want to tell what other people
within your organization. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's very competitive. And as the money got smaller, the pot of money got smaller, and the organization started to increase in number, then it's still not perfect. Like, it's still competitive, but there's more collaboration now than there used to be, and this is anecdotal, but this is what I see. And I guess a lot of the times too, for what I do, is I will see somebody on social media talking about science, and I'm like, "Ooh, I want to talk to you. I want you on do you want to be on my podcast and talk about this?" And that's makes it easy. And it also makes it easy too to have somebody on the podcast who's ready to talk about stuff. Scientists, sometimes they're not always, it takes a little bit of more coaxing. I've never had a problem with scientists coming on and doing an interview. They've always said they've had a great time. In fact, one guy, Dr. David Ebert, known as the Lost Shark Guy, had such a great time that we started a podcast together called Beyond Jaws, and it's still going on to this day. And I got him
he's
more
coming on to do a shark episode with me.
I know. I told him, I was like, you gotta reach out to Jessica. Or I think you reached out to him. He told me, and I was like, yeah. You got to go on this. This is a lot of fun. And he's phenomenal. That interview can probably go on for 2 hours, because we talked all the time and we really got along. He's a good friend of mine now. And he's got such a great history, but he's a guy who loves science. That's all he cares about. He cares about other, of course, people and everything, but he cares about work. He cares about finding sharks, and that's his passion. In fact, we have a video series coming out that it's a new forte in my world of editing, like a mini documentaries for YouTube, and he was going to put it on his YouTube channel. That's going to come out soon, but it's probably by the time this goes out.
I can't wait! It'll be in our show notes. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
To me, you're going down this path of and this energy, all I see is I'm looking at your, on Zoom, I'm looking at the joy, the excitement. And to me, it's this whole big sense of purpose, right? You've given people a chance to sit in conversation with you without the boundaries of, behave in a controlled way and just be super passionate and purposeful
Mm-hmm.
and like let it all out, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you working on? Why is this important? Share. Who do you need to work with to make this happen? What's the first step? What's the next right step
Yeah.
that you could take? So, giving that agency, empowerment, whatever, to whoever is hesitant to take that step or hesitant to share or
Yeah.
hesitant to get big versus stay small and protected because they fear their grant money might not get renewed or whatever it is. Like we live in sort of a different place, right? Like the more,
Yeah.
and a lot of grants actually say who you're working with. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to expand this and scale it and make this not just small because my money needs to go farther than just this one step. So like all this sense of purpose is really just bursting forth.
Well, and to be honest, like, I'd love to be funded. I'd love to be paid to do this and do this full time. When you have this type of freedom where you can really, you're not bound by necessarily an organization. You're not bound by money that you like, I can only speak on such and such because this is what I'm funded for. You have this ability to talk about whatever you want. And it's a little bit exciting because I can do whatever I want. I can go the pathway wherever I want and I can explore. Sometimes I go on a bit of an experiment and sometimes it's great. And other times, no, it's not so great. I recently started a video podcast and put it on YouTube. I basically just turned the camera on. That was a bit difficult. I wasn't used to it. I used to just come in, I'd read an article or I'd have a thought and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to just sit down, press record, boom. I just blab as much as I could. I'd make some notes and stuff to make sure that I'm staying on track and I'm not ranting.
Dimensions, right? And like instead of it just being audio, there's this whole multi-dimensional.
Oh.
And I credit social media. Like we can judge and talk about all the horrible additions to our world that social media has created, right? But like the fact that people now have access to short form or long form, but short form honesty and grit and multimedia facet, like communication and spontaneous communication. And there's some real downsides to when we're using alternate facts and it gets confusing. But like to be able to, for you to be as a resource to the rest of us to just get this stuff out there.
Yeah.
And like start sharing stuff that's important in all different channels.
Yeah.
Is really going to change, right? It changes
things.
Yeah.
It democratizes information. And that can go sway either way. That can sway to, like, as you mentioned, the extreme bad, but it can also extreme to the sway to the good. And if you're just trying to like change information or just get information out there. When I was a kid, there was no internet. We didn't have internet in our home. I don't think I had it until like mid high school. And that was, you went to the library to get all your information. National Geographic magazines, was it the Encyclopedia Britannica? Then there were, you had everything. But like in my library in Ontario, like in Toronto, there wasn't a lot on oceans. There were it was like these beautiful imagery of like the Jacques Cousteau's taking it, but there wasn't a lot of information on that I had access to. And it wasn't as if I can go online and look at other libraries and try and find that. It wasn't around. You had to call and you had to figure out what you could. And even books that were in the bookstore weren't, and you didn't really buy as many books back then. It was mostly library stuff. But here I have the ability to talk to somebody that's in Sri Lanka, or to talk to somebody that's in Puerto Rico, or to talk to somebody that's just like I have a neighbor down the street who listens to my podcast and we discuss it all the time. It's amazing how you can get to so many people, and that's the information that they needed at that point in time. Like just my 8-year-old self is like screaming right now at how easy it is to get access to some of the information. And as you mentioned, it can be good and it can be bad, but I know that the information I'm putting out is the best that I can put out. I've had to correct myself a couple of times, but it's the best that I can put out.
But it's creating, to your point of why this matters, it's creating a sense of energy that we're energizing for. And Andrew gets tens of thousands of listens per episode. So like, there's people being energized to move forward and do something.
Yeah.
So like, these small sound bites are making a difference.
Yeah.
So, the bottom line sort of taking your story of get in it, like go into nature, go be, whatever your purpose is, or whatever you have a feeling that you want to pursue a connection with in life, go there. Like, go do it. Don't just read about it or listen to it, but like go and experience it so that you can be energized to do something, because you can now easily do something. And it's not going to be the thing that changes the world, but it's going to be a step. Right. And communication is huge. Like, just getting the message out there instead of keeping it small is what others need. So
100%.
I'm going with that. Go with that. Like,
and I think too, is like, as a student in science and marine biology, you start to learn certain things, and some of them are heavy. Like, you realize that the ocean's in trouble, and you realize that there are a lot of cumulative effects. And at the time we were like, climate change is going to be gnarly. It's going to be bad as you get older, and you're going to see it. And it felt 20 years ago at that point, felt so long, from now, but now we're in it, and we're feeling the effects. There's no doubt about that. And so all the scientists that were saying, we're really going to feel the next 20 years, they were correct, as we can say it, even though the deniers were like, no, that's going, we're not going to have like crazy wildfires and this and that. Well, unfortunately, we do. But this is the learning process that I want people to have is the more that we know as scientists and marine biologists, you start to become more aware of the decisions that you make, at home, wherever you are, inland, on the coast, offshore, it doesn't matter. You're affecting the oceans. It's all connected. It's all connected into one. And it's our biggest resource that makes our planet sustainable to live. And if we screw that up, we are in trouble, right? And we're in the midst of screwing it up. And so we need to learn, and that's why I keep it open and I keep it honest and I keep it transparent. And we also need to do, and the goal of the podcast is to inspire and like people, the people in the audience. And I used to just say one person to change their life in different ways. So it doesn't have to be, you have to go back to school and do marine biology and become a marine biologist. We have a lot of scientists, we have tons of scientists. What we need people to do is just be like, okay, let's just look, what are the major problems? Okay. Plastic pollution. What can I cut down on? Or what can I do to help? Even though it may not feel as significant, the fact that you're thinking about the ocean and everything you do, when you go to the convenience store and you're really thirsty and that Gatorade bottle looks really good, or that vitamin water looks really good, and you're like, ooh, that looks really good, but it's in a plastic bottle. You're like, no, maybe I'll go buy the powdered version and then I'll go have it at home. Like, it is not a huge change, and it's not going to change the world tomorrow. But what happens is the more we change these different types of habits, the better we get at being a leader for the ocean and protecting it. And then, because then it grows.
And ripple that message.
Yeah.
I went to the store and I didn't buy the bottle.
Yeah.
I refilled my cup and I was just as happy, or even happier, because I didn't put chemicals in me, or whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah.
We have to be talking about it, which is what you're doing. Like, the more we talk about it, the more energy there is around every step every one of us takes.
Yeah.
And as a kid, going down and doing that work, being on the ground and being exposed to something that at the time you had no idea what was, because who would imagine the impact of this time you spent in Louisiana just pursuing a passion.
Yeah.
And then it changing your life, and you're being able to explode this whole important voice.
Yeah.
In every aspect of it, right? And like, in terms of the oceans, the 1,707 episodes talk to 1,707 different issues around the ocean, which are all matter and all connect.
And that's it. And to be honest, like I've had the opportunity to hear back from a lot of from some of the audience members, and some people have changed their lives. I had a guy who was like a plumber in Australia who like quit his job once he found out about the plastic pollution and started an organization where he went to clean up beaches. That doesn't happen every day. Like, I don't expect that to happen every day, but that was really cool to say, oh, okay, the information that you learned from the podcast led you down that path. Another woman that I met,
follow their purpose. I mean, I would
exactly
right? Like,
they obviously weren't happy doing exactly what they were doing and decided like, I'm really passionate about this and this is what I want to do. Same thing with another woman who was she was a marine biologist, and she had done her undergrad. I think she may have done her master's, and she went back to do a PhD while listening to the podcast while she was like on an oyster farm, and she didn't like it. And when it rained, she'd put her earbuds in and she would listen to it. And she's like, I'm miserable doing this, but hey, you know what? I can go do this, and I can go back and do a PhD, and did a PhD at Duke University. And I got to meet her in person, and she's like, oh, I recognize your voice. And I'm like, yeah, well,
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm the host. And she's like, yeah, you're the one the reason why I'm here. I'm like, what? That's ridiculous. I'm like, tell me that story. And it makes me feel good, like to know that people are making these changes. Like, I don't expect everybody to make these types of changes, but these are very drastic changes. But it's nice to know that the words are getting to people. Right. And now with YouTube, hopefully the visuals are helping to get to people. And it's just the way you just got to adapt to the way people listen or watch your information, and to be on as many platforms as possible. I like podcasting because it's easier to do. YouTube is a little bit more intense because there's a lot of video editing to keep watchers watching, but it's fun. I truly enjoy it, and I think the dream for me is if I can hook up with an organization to be their social media manager, then that's what I would do, and because I've had all this experience, and that's where I'd love to head at some point, down the future,
okay,
and really help change it.
So whoever's listening, right? Like, this is your prize for listening, right? Like getting a connection with Andrew Lewin for
exactly
changing the world. So we have our opportunity there. Okay, wrapping it up. What's the message you want to leave us with that we'll do more of that next step of change for anyone who's lucky enough to be listening to this?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I would say the biggest thing is when you start learning about some of the issues that are hitting the ocean hard, take a deep breath. We're not going to change, and we can't change it the next day. It is a step process, and we are headed on the right steps in some, in others, we're headed backwards in some areas. But what the biggest thing is the power of community. The power of the numbers will get you there, especially in democratic societies. And the more the better and more effective you can be within that community. And just stay positive, keep with the optimism, and we will change it for the better, and we'll get back to our place. The other thing I would say is the benefit of being like truly sustainable and making changes is usually benefit to your wallet and your health. In all, like, I haven't come across one thing that you can go, like, if you want, to help your wallet and help climate change, well, move to a heat exchanger instead of gas furnace. If you want to help climate change as well, and if you can afford it, get an EV. They're starting to come down in price, and they're starting to be more and more available, and there's more charging stations available, and it's really handy. And, in Canada anyway, most of our electric power comes from clean power. And so it's getting cleaner. Those things help you in your wallet. If you want to stay healthy, stay away from single-use plastics, especially water bottles. That stuff gets into your body, and every time you buy, you're basically telling the company that is making those, it's, hey, I'm agreeing that you should do this because, like, I'm supporting you in doing this. By not buying it, then they're eventually going to get the idea. And the more people that don't buy it, the better, right? That's when they're really going to change their thing, because they went from glass to plastics because it was cheaper for them, and they make more money off of it. That's the only reason.
Short term.
Yeah. People they say that, people like them more. Pick up a glass Coke bottle and a plastic Coke bottle and tell me which one you like the most, because I'll be very surprised if it's a plastic one. But that's the thing, is it's really take a deep breath, take one step at a time. You're not going to change the world tomorrow, but together we can change the world one day. And that's really what it comes down to. Beautiful.
What a beautiful way to wrap it all up. Thank you so much, Andrew.
No problem. Thank you.
One of my mentors and heroes now.
Well, I appreciate it.
Andrew.
Oh, and I love what you're doing here. This is amazing. So I'm glad everybody's listening.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem. You bet.
This has been a production of BLI Studios, produced by me, Kai. Follow along with our other BLI produced shows at balancinglifesissues.com/podcast-BLI. Got an idea for the show? Email me, Kai, at balancinglifesissues.com. And don't forget to stay in touch with your host, Jessica, at jessica@winwinwinmindset.com. Anything else to add, Miles?
Yeah.